Scientists found an entire city of Gyangola that was hidden beneath the dense jungles of Mexico for 600 years. It covers 360 hectares, had over 1,000 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, a network of internal roads, and a well-planned urban layout with temples and ball courts, and separate neighborhoods for the elites and commoners. For centuries, people believed there was just an abandoned fortress there, based on stories passed on from generation to generation. Until recently, there was no way to see how truly huge it was without spending years on the ground. But thanks to the new technology, a remote sensing tool called LiDAR, they got a 3D model of the area in just 2 hours from a plane. Gyangola was built between the years 1350 and 1521. It was a crucially important place for the Zapotec people, a group that had lived in the area since around 700 BCE. In Gyangola, families lived together in homes with big patios in the middle, surrounded by rooms. When families got bigger, they built more rooms and made their homes larger. The study found that both the leaders and regular people worked together to make the city better. Because Gyangola was surrounded by mountains, they used this land wisely and built their houses in a way that fit the slopes and let rainwater flow naturally. This helped keep their homes safe and strong. They were built so well that many of these buildings are still standing, even after hundreds of years. There are 2 pyramids in the center of the city. They may have been used as temples where the priests celebrated rites and ceremonies to their deities. The priests brought offerings to the altars, and the people assembled at the 2 squares that are now sunken. Then, there is also a palace with 64 rooms, some of them with circular columns on several sloped terraces. There are patios with many stairways all connected to each other. The sensing tool also found a round-shaped lookout point on a natural rock, where the Zapotec people could see their foes approaching from a distance. Researchers also noticed 2 circular structures that could have been used to watch the stars and measure time. They also found some tombs, so there was most definitely a city cemetery. By the end of the 1400s, the Zapotec people controlled a large territory on the Pacific coast and had successfully defended their land from the Aztecs, who were trying to take over more territory. They did the almost impossible and survived a 7-month-long siege at Gyangola. When they won this conflict and kept control of the southern part of Mesoamerica, the Zapotecs didn't need to live in Gyangola anymore. Staying in the mountains had its pros, but they needed fresh water and good farmland to grow food. The small city of Tehuantepec, just 12 miles away, had these conditions, so they moved there just before the Spanish arrived in 1521. Over time, Zapotec traditions started to fade, but their culture didn't disappear completely, and more than 300,000 Zapotec people still live in Oaxaca state in Mexico. They speak their own languages and keep their traditions alive. Creating the 3D model of the lost city is just the beginning of the research. Archaeologists hope that future studies of Gyangola will help us learn more about how the Zapotecs were organized, how they ruled their cities, and how they interacted with the Spanish when they arrived. They plan to study all 1,100 buildings found in the LiDAR scan, and it will take a few years. Instead of digging up the ruins, they will use special technology to scan the land and learn more about the city without damaging it. This same tech helped scientists find another massive ancient city that lay hidden beneath the thick green canopy of the Amazon forest. A whole network of houses, plazas, roads, and canals was hiding in the shadow of a mighty volcano. For centuries, many scientists assumed that ancient Amazonian people lived in tiny huts, clearing patches of land to survive. But this city, built 2,500 years ago and inhabited for 1,000 years, proves the opposite. Now, scientists think tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people lived in complex urban societies. Scanning the area found 6,000 rectangular platforms, each measuring around 66 by 33 feet, and standing 6 to 9 feet high. These structures were arranged in clusters around central plazas, with straight roads with perfect right angles and paths connecting them. One of the roads was 16 miles long. Building straight roads like this is far harder than just following the landscape. Some of these roads may have had deep spiritual or ceremonial significance. The volcano's rich soil helped the civilization thrive, but it may also have led to its downfall. Researchers also found signs of threats to the cities, such as ditches that blocked entrances to the settlements. Maybe some people living nearby were trying to get in. The next step for the researchers will be studying the adjoining 116 square miles to know more about this large, complex society that could be bigger than the well-known Mayan societies in Mexico and Central America. Meanwhile, in 1963, a man in Turkey discovered an ancient city while renovating his own house. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room. He kept digging and saw a tunnel. It led to the Derinkuyu underground city. It's one of the deepest multi-level underground settlements in Cappadocia and in all of Turkey. The inhabitants lived on 8 levels and had access to cellars, storage areas, chapels, a school, a study room, and other structures. All floors were connected by an extensive network of tunnels. The underground city was probably built as a shelter. The construction is hiding at 279 feet deep, and you can't see it from the outside. The complex was large enough to shelter about 20,000 people with their livestock and food supplies. There was also a 180-foot ventilation shaft. Archaeologists believe that Phrygians first built the levels. The Romans used and enhanced the structure later. The golden time of Derinkuyu was during the Byzantine era. The next lost and found city appeared only in a few inscriptions and ancient texts, so no one could be sure it really existed. Scientists searched the majority of the coast of Egypt until one archaeologist and his team detected a colossal face looking at them from under the water. The ancient city of Heracleion was discovered completely submerged 4 miles off Alexandria's coast. In the ruins of the lost city, there were 64 ships, 700 anchors, and a treasure trove of gold coins. Archaeologists believe the 16-foot-tall statue and the temple remains are the most important findings discovered by the expedition. Back then, the city had ceremonies and celebrations that took place in the Temple of Ammon. The ruins and artifacts were made from granite and diorite, so they were in good condition even after having been in contact with water for centuries. They give people a glimpse into what life was like 2,300 years ago in one of the most important trade ports of the world. The city had a network of canals, sort of like an ancient Egyptian Venice. The canals linked many separate harbors and anchorages. Towers, temples, houses, and other structures were also linked by bridges. Heracleion was the country's main port for international trade and the collection of taxes. No one really knows how the city ended up submerged, but archaeologists connect it with natural causes. At the end of the 2nd century BCE, most probably after a flood, it got covered with water. Then Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander the Great, became more glorious than Heracleion. Before Alexandria's fame, Heracleion was the main port of entry to Egypt. So after the tragedy, many ships heading for Heracleion had to change their route and go to Alexandria. Heracleion lost its glory until its discovery in 2000.
Researchers have found almost 1,000 previously hidden Maya settlements in the tropical lowlands of what is now northern Guatemala. They did it with LiDAR, light detection and ranging lasers, which they used to scan areas from the air. The region we're talking about is pretty vast. All those structures and buildings they saw over there stretch across about 650 square miles. And these spots were supposedly occupied thousands of years ago. It seems all these structures were pretty densely packed, so people lived close to each other. They had at least 417 ancient villages, towns, and cities where they could identify boundaries. These structures and buildings were actually a part of a state that looked like a kingdom. Some of these settlements were built as sports courts, civic, ceremonial, and religious centers, and residential homes. There were also massive palaces, platforms, dams, pyramids, and causeways across that area. People who lived there also had reservoirs where they collected water. So, they needed the power to organize thousands of specialists and workers. And they also needed many skilled people to build such structures without the technologies we have today. They needed lime producers, architects, mortar and quarry specialists, lithic technicians, those who took care of legal enforcement, and other important roles to establish the true community. This cool laser scanning system researchers used while exploring this area can even penetrate very dense ecosystems and vegetation. The light bounces off different surfaces and then creates a digitally reconstructed map. This map is based on how much time it takes for the pulses to get back to a receiver. So, with this laser system, they discovered they were also lowlands for agriculture. So why exactly did the Maya settle in this region? It was a specific area. Plus, it was hard to build such an amazing kingdom in a tropical rainforest climate. Back in the old times, ancient peoples had mostly inhabited areas in drier climates. Over there, they would build water resources, which were some sort of the basis of society and a source of life. An example of this is Teotihuacan of Highland Mexico, although they did have a couple of navigable rivers they could use for transport and trade. But these rainforest areas had their advantages too. The Maya used natural resources like limestone, which was their primary building material, salt, and the volcanic rock obsidian, which they used for different tools. Also, they managed to find enough dry land to live and build homes there. The lowlands were seasonal swamps called bajos, and they were perfect for agriculture because of the fertile soil. Generally, the Maya built settlements that could endure rainy periods too. They were ready for different circumstances, including flood and drought, which is something you could see in how they built houses. Their architecture was also one piece of evidence that showed their community was like a centralized kingdom-like state, which shows they stuck together through tough times. The Mayan Empire was very powerful, and it reached its peak about the 6th century CE. They were excellent at pottery, agriculture, writing, mathematics, and calendars. They were the ones who created complex calendar systems, such as the calendar round, which is based on 365 days. Although some believe the Mayan calendar predicted December 21st, 2012 would be the end of the world, it was just a coincidence with the end of a certain full cycle. They would call it the long count calendar, and it lasts 5,125 years. The Mayan people left behind an impressive amount of astonishing architecture and symbolic artwork. Most of their stone cities ended up abandoned by 900 CE. No one still knows why the Mayan civilization in that area collapsed, although there are some theories. Some think that by the 9th century, these people had exhausted the resources around them to the point that they could no longer feed and sustain such a big population. Others believe some city-states didn't get along that well, so they broke down the traditional system of power they used to have. Some say it was all because of a very long period of drought. It could be a combination of all these factors, though. But one Mayan city, located on an island, even survived until the 17th century. It was long after the rest of the Mayan civilizations had been destroyed or abandoned. If you're a traveler, you might know the town by its modern name, Flores. Scientists believe about 2,000 people lived there. The earliest Maya people were farmers. They cultivated crops like beans, squash, corn, and cassava. As they had many interesting ingredients, they created hundreds of cool recipes. Many of those are still present even today. For example, in modern Mexican cooking. And especially popular are papayas, cacao, avocados, squash, pineapples, chili peppers, beans, and so on. Even though the Maya mostly practiced a kind of primitive type of slash-and-burn agriculture, there is also evidence of them using some more advanced farming methods, like terracing and irrigation. And they were big chocolate lovers. More than 3,500 years ago, the Olmecs of Mesoamerica probably turned out to be the first to realize that it takes some work for us to get such a cool thing as chocolate. But the Maya were the ones who turned it into a true form of art. Scientists found out about it when they found cacao in Mayan pottery. Their chocolate would be mixed with honey, water, cornmeal, and chili peppers. That's how you get a spicy, savory hot chocolate beverage you can try even today in Mexico and Central America. Also, they used written language in their books. Their paper was made from fig tree bark, and using strips of that paper, they created a large library of books. Books made of this material are called codices, and 4 of these can still be found today. Sadly, many books were lost over time because of the humid climate or some human factors. The classic Maya built a bunch of palaces and temples that had a stepped pyramid shape. They decorated them with inscriptions and reliefs, which have earned them the reputation of being incredible artists of Mesoamerica. For the Mayans, flat foreheads were the most desirable thing on someone's face. They were generally really into aesthetics, and having a flat forehead was one of the main things where you could meet their highest aesthetic standard. They also liked to glam up their looks with makeup and clothing. Also, the Mayans were master tattoo artists. Actually, they were one of the first civilizations that started doing such forms of body art. They had a rich culture and believed in many things, such as fairies. Many civilizations across the globe believed in these mythical creatures, which had different names everywhere. The Mayans called those creatures aluxes. They would make sculptures of aluxes from wood or clay, take them to the forest, and hide in some secret spots. The Maya believed these sculptures would come to life during the night and take the role of guardians of their land, animals, and crops. The Maya believed caves were entrances that led to the underworld. You can even visit some of these caves if you like. For example, you can explore the jungles of Quintana Roo and Yucatan near Cancun. There are many spots where researchers found artifacts the Mayans had left behind. They were one of the first cultures that learned how to use rubber latex and make, for example, rubber balls for the many interesting games they had. They used natural latex and then probably mixed it with some other natural substances. That's how they came up with the bouncy balls they played with. They also built cool steam baths. The Maya had structures made from stone that looked like something we know today as bathtubs. Plus, they were building heated stone structures we know as sweat houses. Researchers found these in El Salvador and Guatemala, and they were previously hidden under volcanic ash.
See this place on the map? Yeah, right there. It's estimated that around 100 people have vanished or lost their lives here. Why, you ask? Well, it seems they were all looking for this guy, Percy Fawcett. He was a British colonel, famous for his sharp blue eyes, perfectly groomed beard, and signature hat. He looked like a character from Pride and Prejudice, but lived more like Indiana Jones. In fact, this character was inspired by Fawcett's story. But his disappearance in 1925 was more macabre than any movie plot. Colonel Fawcett was bold. Not the ask your neighbor's Wi-Fi password kind of bold. I'm talking full-on, I don't care that much about my life bold. He used to be a soldier in Sri Lanka and even did a secret spy gig in Morocco, but he needed more. So in 1906, Fawcett started exploring parts of Brazil and Bolivia where no one had dared to go before. His mission was to create secret, mind-blowing maps. Okay, that doesn't sound too risky, but trust me, it was. If you want to explore the world nowadays, you just open Google Earth and, well, that's it. No danger, no adrenaline, just maybe 1 or 2 creepy street view photos. Ew. But we're talking about the beginning of the 20th century, when satellites and this weird Google car didn't exist. Back then, if you wanted to fill in the world map, you actually had to explore the land on foot. So that's how Colonel Fawcett ended up in South America. And he became famous for his expeditions to map out the wild Amazon. He was the first guy to record the locations of waterfalls in that region, for example. But then he got obsessed. Blame it on lack of sleep or whatever sketchy Amazon jungle juice he was sipping, but suddenly he was like, I'll bet there's an ancient advanced city hidden somewhere around here. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. But he was hooked on that idea. Hanging out with native Indians for so long convinced him that large groups could totally thrive in the middle of a massive rainforest. And of course, Fawcett loved a good old adventure story, especially the ones from the 16th and 17th centuries, written by European explorers. In those stories, adventurers claimed they had found huge settlements and fine roadways deep in the heart of Latin America. But Fawcett's all-time favorite story came from a manuscript written in 1753. Back then, adventurers were hunting for precious metals in Brazil when they stumbled upon a ruined city with monumental buildings, roads, and plazas. Oh, and every corner had a Roman-style spire. Naturally, the colonel was all in to find it. Too bad no one told him this manuscript is mostly considered a forgery. Yep, this story is as real as Snow White's. But then, things got weird. The settlement described in that manuscript was supposedly located in the northeast side of Brazil. But now, he's saying there's an advanced civilization in Mato Grosso, which is in a different part of the country. So he decided to name this new place the City of Z. Back in the 1920s, the colonel launched 2 separate expeditions to find it. But both trips failed, as he faced terrible weather, fever, and of course, exhaustion. Now, tell me in the comments, what do you think Fawcett did after 2 failed expeditions? Option A, he quit. Option B, he called his mom. Option C, he tried again because he didn't get the memo that the universe is clearly saying stop. Well, of course, option C is the right answer. This is relentless Fawcett we're talking about. So, 3 years later, the colonel finally gathered enough cash to launch yet another expedition in search of the City of Z. All he needed was a crew of people crazy enough to join him. Famous and experienced explorers were begging to come along. But nope, Fawcett decided to take his son and his best buddy instead. In January 1925, this brave trio set off on their journey. They packed mosquito nets, canned food, and made a promise, "We shall return." Another spoiler alert, they didn't. Uh-oh. The journey kicked off in New Jersey, and then they sailed all the way to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. There, they stopped to grab some pack animals, like horses, and hired a couple of local guides. Now they were ready to head to the city of Cuiabá. Now keep in mind the distances in Brazil are crazy huge. So this little journey was like traveling from Miami to Chicago on foot. 3 months later, they finally ventured into the jungle for the first time. And that's when the fun really began. The crew faced piranha-infested rivers, an endless maze of thick trees, and the worst part, bugs. The constant annoying zzz of a gazillion mosquitoes wouldn't let them sleep, and Fawcett's best friend's foot got huge from tick bites. But the colonel didn't have time to babysit his friend's princess foot. Oh no, he was too obsessed to take a break. In fact, at some point, he was so far ahead of his companions that he had to camp alone for a night. On May 29th, Fawcett finally came to his senses. There was no City of Z. But did he let that stop him? Not really. He unpacked their gear and sent the local guides back to Cuiabá. But before saying a final goodbye, he asked them to deliver a letter to his wife, saying something like, "Don't worry, hon, our son is well and getting stronger every day." Sure he was. Anyway, after this dramatic farewell, the trio set off into the bush alone. The darkness swallowed the thick forest, and then they were never seen again. Okay, that was intense, so let's fast forward. 2 years later, the newspapers were still speculating whether the trio could still be alive, and Fawcett became a legend, like Bigfoot, but less hairy. One guy said that the colonel had become one of the locals and was living his happily ever after in the jungle. Another guy said he was held prisoner by the Indians, but no one could confirm any of these sightings. It wasn't until 1928 that the British authorities finally thought better late than never and decided to look for Fawcett and his crew. By that time, they were sure their expedition had perished, but they still needed proof. And after days and days of surviving the jungle's worst nightmares, they found, well, nothing. But in a weird way, this mystery inspired more explorers to look for them. It's estimated that about 100 people have passed away in this process, and a few have followed in the explorers' footsteps by disappearing without a trace. So, what really happened to the expedition? Researchers have pointed their fingers at everything under the sun: parasitic infections, starvation, drowning, jaguar attacks, you name it. Some even say Fawcett dove headfirst into mysticism and started an occult community in the jungle. The Brazilian anthropologist Orlando Vilas-Boas was probably the one who got the closest to solving this case. Back in the 1950s, he was working with the Kalapalo Indians when they suddenly admitted to, getting rid of Fawcett. They even had bones to prove it. But it turns out a forensic analysis showed that the remains didn't belong to the colonel. So we're back to square one, and nobody knows, to this day, whatever the heck happened to them. Fawcett's quest, as we know it today, is based on some pretty questionable sources. But there is a possibility that he wasn't living in Delulu land after all. Recent discoveries suggest that his idea of a sophisticated jungle city wasn't just pure fantasy. In 2024, a massive ancient city was found in the Amazon, hidden beneath dense vegetation. Evidence suggests it was built around 2,500 years ago, and it was surprisingly advanced, featuring houses and plazas, all connected by an incredible network of roads and canals. But this city was in a forest in Ecuador, not Brazil. So who knows? Maybe the legendary city of Z is still out there. Ooh.
You are lost deep within the jungle in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There are strange noises all around you, and to make it worse, the sun is setting. Soon, you'll be alone in the middle of an unknown rainforest. Guess it was a pretty bad idea to come looking for El Dorado on your own, wasn't it? You keep walking as fast as you can, when suddenly, wait! What's this you're seeing? It looks like large stairways made out of stone. This definitely doesn't look natural, so you take a picture. Maybe you didn't strike gold, but you might have just found something relevant. Congratulations! You found Okamtun, a long-lost Mayan city, hidden 37 miles into the jungle. The name literally translates to stone column. Stone was probably in at the time, so these guys used a lot of it to build their pyramids, houses, and even ball courts. If you ever thought that Europeans invented ball games, think twice. Mayans loved to play ball games for recreational purposes. Okamtun is part of a series of other long-lost Mayan cities that are being discovered with the help of new technology nowadays. We'll talk more about the other ones in a jiffy. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this one is that it was surrounded by wetlands, which is why the city was built on high ground. The city was monumental, covering an area of over 120 acres. That would be as big as 90 football fields right next to each other. Scientists have found proof that Okamtun had pyramids of up to 49 feet high, and that it was likely an important social hub between 250 and 1000 CE. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the 19th century. Modern technologies, such as LiDAR imaging, help archaeologists see through dense canopies of the forests. This means that people don't really have to risk getting lost in the tropical jungle like you did at the beginning of this video. LiDAR works sort of like an X-ray. It sends out laser beams that can detect any signs of ruins or ancient constructions. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parchak, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in South America, Egypt, and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any signs of where there could have been cities long ago. She says that more often than not, what happens is that ruins are covered by vegetation, soil, or sand, which makes them super tricky to find. But thanks to these awesome tools, scientists also made the huge discovery of ancient Mayan causeways, which spread throughout old Mayan territories. I mean, take a look at these roadways. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places such as Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130 feet wide roads painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime. Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these, and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan highways we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over the swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, it's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possible 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spiderweb, and from what archaeologists have gathered, this huge system of roads worked to connect a big system of economic and social interactions between Mayan cities. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 2000 BCE, was made of small, tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids, with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone to make them white. That's pretty cool, right? But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, experts believe that at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. And they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Mayans had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, and plazas. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. If you've ever seen examples of ancient Mayan cities, this is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan conquest state. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It's composed of a series of complex monuments. The North Acropolis is one of Tikal's most ancient complexes of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. Then there's Chichen Itza. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castillo, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. You can see that these folks were a pretty big deal, huh? That's why nobody can really understand what happened to them. There's a big lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? New research in 2017 did bring some new discoveries into the mix. Using data from a site at Ceibal, located at southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected demise of this great civilization. The information shows that instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. It's hard to pinpoint the exact causes, though. But hey, recent discoveries are shedding a big light on humanity's past. Not only about the Mayan Empire, but about other long-lost civilizations of South America. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done using satellite imaging technology and is also shocking scientists. Some images from near the Xingu River, also in the Amazon, suggest that cities of millions of people might have existed inside the jungle, way before our modern civilization ever existed. I mean, if this doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. Satellite imagery also detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 and 1200 CE in the Bolivian Amazon forest. These proofs suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people right in the middle of the Amazon forest. When researchers from the University of Florida went on ground to check the satellite information, they were shocked to find several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans.
There's this interesting ancient site near St. Louis, Missouri, that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Cahokia, and it used to be a huge city with up to 20,000 people living there back in the 11th century. It's full of these massive earthen mounds that were built by hand, and the biggest one is still there today, at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Even though we don't know everything about this civilization, researchers have been able to piece together some information from the remains they've found. For starters, they found some pretty old teeth at this site. After studying their appearance and structure, scientists suggest that a lot of different indigenous groups lived there. About a third of them came from other areas in the middle of the continent, which they figured out by studying the different levels of various substances in the teeth. And get this, the way the mounds are arranged shows that this was actually a planned-out city, not just a bunch of villages grouped together. The rulers lived on top of the mounds, while everyone else lived in other structures. It's amazing to think that they were doing things like farming, hunting, logging, pottery, and weaving, all within this one giant city. Right in the middle of Cahokia, there was this giant mound that was about 100 feet tall, and around it, there was this huge wooden fence. Inside the fence was the city center, which had a big open space called a plaza. Archaeologists think that the plaza was designed to represent the 4 cardinal directions of the world. It was like the people who built it wanted to create a place that was in harmony with the universe. The center of the city was where they held ceremonies and events, and it was such a big deal that people from outside Cahokia would come to be a part of them too. What became of this city? Hard to tell. Some people think that the reason it fell apart is that they cut down too many trees and the land got all messed up. Other scientists believe that's not true, because the soil was still in pretty good shape after the city was gone. The Europeans were not even around at that time, so they couldn't have influenced the downfall of Cahokia either. There's also one theory that suggests there were fights with other communities that caused the city to collapse. These days, there are over 65 preserved mounds, and you can even climb the steps of the tallest one. The best part is that local authorities are thinking of making it a national park, so you should totally plan to visit before it gets too crowded. Mohenjo-Daro is another lost ancient city that's still surrounded by mystery. Located in modern-day Pakistan, it was a city that flourished during the Bronze Age, and it was extremely advanced for its time. It had things like water systems and fancy architecture that other cities didn't have back then. Despite these features, it's not as well known as other ancient cities, like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's even weirder is that at some point, the city was abandoned, and no one knows why. Archaeologists found the city in 1911, but it took a while for them to realize how important it was. Eventually, they uncovered a lot of really interesting things about the city, like its advanced sanitation system. Excavations uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a city-wide sewage system. They also had a lot of trade connections and made some really beautiful objects, like pottery, jewelry, and figurines that were sold all over the region. Despite its amazing culture and knowledge, scientists have yet to figure out why the city was abandoned. Some people think changes in the nearby river might have had something to do with it. The writings that the people of Mohenjo-Daro left behind are still a complex code, even for the most skilled specialists, making it even harder to piece together their history. Have you heard of the lost city of Kolmanskop? It used to be a small settlement in the Namib Desert. Legend has it that it got its name from a man named Coleman who got stuck in the local dunes and was never seen again. But that's not the interesting part. In 1908, a railway worker found a shiny stone and showed it to the chief railway foreman, who turned out to be a hobby mineralogist. They discovered it was a diamond, and soon, Kolmanskop became the richest town in Africa and one of the richest places in the world. It had luxurious stone houses, a school, a hospital, and even an ice factory to produce ice for fridges. The hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, which was supposedly used to check if workers were illegally swallowing diamonds. Its popularity began to decline in the late 1920s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants soon began to flee the city in search of a better life, leaving the buildings abandoned. In 1938, all machinery was taken south and the town was left to the desert. The last inhabitant left Kolmanskop between 1956 and 1960. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town. You've surely heard about this next ancient city, Machu Picchu. It's this incredible ancient location in Peru. It stretches across a huge piece of land in the Andes Mountains and sits high above sea level. It's even considered one of the wonders of the modern world. But here's the thing. Scientists aren't exactly sure what it was used for. It could have supported up to 750 people, but there aren't a lot of human clues left behind. Some people think it was more of a spiritual or ceremonial place, while others believe it may have been like a fancy spa retreat for the nobles. The extensive terraces might mean it was used for crop testing or as a trading hub. And there's even a theory that it was used as a prison because they found a cell-like area too. It's amazing that even today, archaeologists and historians are still puzzled about how it was built. Did you know that they probably didn't even use wheels for transportation? And those massive granite rocks were somehow pushed up the steep Andean mountains, even though most of them weighed a lot. Some historians think that hundreds of people worked together to push each rock up the peak. The huge stones at Machu Picchu are also so close together that you can't see any cracks between them. It's pretty cool because it also makes the area safe during earthquakes, which is important since Peru is a shaky country. But how did the stones stay put during all those quakes? They actually move a little bit, but then they go back to their original spot, almost like they're dancing. Some people think wet wooden wedges were used to keep them in place, but that doesn't really add up, considering how big the structures are. Locals back then also seem to have built Machu Picchu without using any pack animals or iron tools. They had to sculpt and put everything together using mostly their hands. Plus, the citadel is built on a fault, so they had to move a bunch of stone and earth to make it flat. Scientists also think that the real construction is actually underground because of the deep foundations and drainage system. In fact, there's a hidden water system that was just recently discovered using 3D scanning. They didn't even use mortar to put the granite blocks together. They were so precise that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. One theory suggests that people that lived there used stone tools made of a harder material than the stone they were cutting. I bet you've never heard of the legendary oasis of Zerzura. This ancient city is said to be hidden somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and its discovery could mean unimaginable riches and untold secrets. According to an anonymous 15th century Arabic guide, the key to unlocking the city lies in the beak of a bird carved on the city gate. Zerzura might not be as popular as Machu Picchu or the pyramids, but that just makes it more mysterious. Legend has it that Zerzura is built around this big oasis somewhere in the desert west of the Nile. Apparently, it's made out of white stone and has all these luxurious houses and gold decorations. The story goes that a scribe wrote down the account of a traveler who stumbled upon Zerzura while looking for his lost camel. At one point in his journey, the man got caught up in a sandstorm, where he got separated from the rest of his group. The traveler kept wandering in the desert for days, and then, out of nowhere, two men showed up and guided him to the city of Zerzura. The traveler described this city as an oasis filled with little birds and made out of pure white stonework. The city is also said to be guarded by giants. In 1835, an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson mentioned the city in one of his books. He spoke to a man from Egypt who found the city by accident after days of wandering through the desert. He mentioned some ruins, unusual stonework, and a large oasis surrounded by palm trees. The man even gave some instructions on how the city could be found, indicating that it might be in the western desert of Egypt. But here's the kicker. Even though a group of explorers went out to find Zerzura, they didn't succeed. At the same time, they did stumble upon a bunch of previously unknown oases. In the early 1900s, numerous expeditions were sent to find the city, including one with a fleet of Ford Model A trucks. But, alas, none were successful. Others say Zerzura did exist at one point, but not anymore. It's possible it was swallowed by the desert. It's believed that back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually green. Scientists even found traces of ancient rivers that flowed through the area 100,000 years ago, creating green corridors across the desert. But Zerzura might have never been real to begin with. Maybe it only existed in the minds of people, a figment of their imagination as they were struggling in the African desert. For thousands of years, people have been obsessed with the hunt for another lost city, Atlantis. But if this place really existed, where on Earth, or under the sea, could it be? According to Plato, Atlantis was an actual place, and it was supposedly located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Strait of Gibraltar. But how did this mythical city become synonymous with a perfect, paradise-like society? Well, you can thank Ignatius Donnelly for that. The American writer published a book in 1882 where he outlined 13 hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Donnelly truly believed that this lost city was where ancient humans lived in peace and joy for centuries. Donnelly even thought that Atlantis was the original source of many ancient civilizations around the world. And if we just followed Plato's clues, we could totally find Atlantis. Sounds like a treasure hunt, right? What inspired Donnelly to go on this quest in the first place, you might ask? Apparently, an amateur archaeologist discovered the city of Troy, using Homer's The Iliad as a guide. Well, if Troy was real, then why not Atlantis? Back in the day, some people believed that America was the legendary Atlantis. Columbus really stirred up some excitement when he brought back news about the New World to Europe. But the real hunt for Atlantis didn't really start until the 20th and 21st centuries. Some people tried to connect the dots between a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini and the destruction of Minoan settlements. But in 2018, a team of investigators claimed they had nailed it, announcing they had discovered concrete proof that Atlantis had existed. What was their evidence, you ask? A series of mysterious circles in a national park in Spain. But the circles turned out to be nothing more than experimental ponds for studying zooplankton. Let's face it, there's no real evidence that Plato's lost city of Atlantis actually existed. But it doesn't make searching for it any less exciting, does it? The Fountain of Youth isn't a lost city per se, but it is another mythical location that many have claimed to have stumbled upon over the years. Long ago, people were obsessed with the idea of living forever, or at least extending their lives as much as possible. Each culture had its own wild story, like the Greeks talking about a magic fountain that let people live longer, or Alexander the Great finding a river of paradise that could heal the wounded. Japanese legends spoke of hot springs that could make you young again, while the Caribbean locals talked about the restorative powers of the water in one of their own mystical lands. Explorers searched far and wide for these magical waters, but nothing. Probably the most famous of all was the story of the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who thought he'd found it in Florida. Now, Ponce de Leon was quite a character. He sailed with Columbus and became an important figure in the area now known as the Dominican Republic. He found gold in Puerto Rico and even became the island's administrator. But when the ruler of Spain decided to replace him in his duties, he got upset and decided to explore Florida, looking for gold and the elusive Fountain of Youth. He explored the Bahamas, but sadly, he didn't find any gold or magic water. He did, however, make his way to Florida. He explored the coast and even discovered the Gulf Stream. Unfortunately, his last expedition didn't go well, and he was wounded. But the legend of him searching for the Fountain of Youth lived on. Even though historians don't think he was really looking for the Fountain of Youth, thousands of people visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park every year to try the sulfur-smelling water. It's the oldest attraction in Florida, which has been around since the 17th century. Some say the water has unusual properties, but I'll leave that up to you to decide after you visit this place. Norse mythology has its own mysterious land called Thule. It's said to be somewhere between Scandinavia and Iceland, where the sun barely shines and the cold bites hard. The folks there survive on a diet of millet, herbs, fruits, and roots, washed down with a grain and honey brew. As for its exact location, scholars can't seem to agree on it to this day. The legendary ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was said to be the first to stumble upon Thule during his quest for tin mines. He sailed his way up north, passing by Scotland, and after 6 long days of sailing, he reached Thule. The people there, according to Pytheas, were quite primitive, but that's no surprise since they were just simple farmers living off the land. They showed Pytheas where the sun set on the shortest day of the year. They also told him that in winter, the sun never rose at all, and in summer, there was no night. For many years, historians have been debating the true identity of this mythical land of Thule. Some say it's Iceland, while others claim it's Norway. A little bit of progress has been made recently with the help of a team of researchers. If their findings are correct, Thule might be the elusive island of Smola. That's farther south than any of the Norwegian islands that were on the list of contenders. It may be too soon to celebrate, but it does look like Thule has finally been found.
Hey, how do you feel about taking a trip back in time? We're diving into the history of the Amazon forest to unravel the mystery of its lost cities. Grab your bug spray and hop on. The Amazon forest is the world's largest rainforest. The environment there can be extremely challenging for human life. Yet, the legend goes that the Amazon has been home to sprawling settlements, rich in unmeasurable wealth. Could that really be true? Or is that none other than a figment of our collective imagination? The legend of El Dorado might be the myth that started this whole thing. As European explorers began their excavations in American lands back in the 1500s, word got out of an Amazonian civilization that used to paint their leader in gold as an offering to higher powers. The legend of El Hombre Dorado, aka the Golden Man, began to quickly spread around Europe. Explorers got excited at the possibility of finding an infinite amount of gold somewhere deep within the Latin American jungle. And as you can imagine, expeditions to the continent began to multiply with each passing year. It didn't take long before explorers found this civilization. They were known as the Muisca people and were located in Colombia, near Lake Gudavia. The Muisca people had a tradition of painting their leader, aka the Zipa, from head to toe in gold. In a ceremonial gesture, the Zipa would swim into the river, spreading gold dust all over the lake. For the Muisca, this was their way of acknowledging and thanking the higher powers of the universe they believed in. When European explorers heard and witnessed this practice, they were amazed. For them, gold was used solely for commercial purposes as their main currency for trade. This made them think that the Muisca people must have stacks and stacks of gold hidden somewhere in the jungle for them to use it so abundantly. Well, that's how the legend of El Dorado was born. What was once the practice of El Hombre Dorado traveled on word of mouth until it became El Dorado, a fictional city that was most likely to hide piles of gold. The hunt for this city led Europeans to spend large amounts of money to scour the Amazon forest. Unfortunately, all of their expeditions came back empty-handed. That is, if they ever came back at all. Now, jump to the beginning of the 1900s. In England, the Royal Geographic Society, a prestigious British institution, was looking for somebody willing to travel down to Latin America to trace the border between Brazil and Bolivia. More specifically, the part of the border that is nestled deep within the Amazon rainforest. One Sir Percy Fawcett was a Latin American aficionado, and he gladly volunteered to do the job. Oh, it's important to note that the Amazon forest is virtually the size of the continental USA. It sprawls across 8 countries, including Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia. And trust me, getting around is no easy feat. The jungle is covered in dense vegetation, and in addition to that, it's home to insane predators such as anaconda snakes, panthers, crocodiles, piranhas, and so on. But despite all that, Fawcett was very successful in his mapping adventure and seemed to be wanting to come back more. Back in England, Fawcett would scour diaries from other explorers hoping to learn more about the ancient Amazonian civilizations. He would read about the Incas and the Mayans and the great empires they built. He believed that if the Incas were capable of building empires that stretched over 2 million square miles, this could mean that other Amazonian civilizations could have thrived there too. During his research, Fawcett came across a report from a 16th century explorer. The report told of a city deep within the Amazon forest that held unimaginable quantities of minerals, a town that stretched for 15 miles without any space from a house to house. This report fueled Fawcett's imagination to a new extreme. From then on, he became obsessed with finding what he called the lost city of Z. Over years, Fawcett searched the Amazon forest, usually looking for stone ruins that could possibly indicate human settlements. On his later expeditions, he focused on exploring the state of Mato Grosso in central Brazil. He would travel from Europe and into the lower region of the Xingu River. The trip to the Xingu would take him around 14 days on foot. Then, he would set sail in small wooden boats accompanied by local indigenous leaders that knew the region better than anyone. How he communicated with the indigenous population is still a mystery, since they only spoke in local dialects. Some scientists believe that this could have been the real reason why he never found the city. They believed he wasn't able to communicate what exactly he was looking for. And this was not his greatest difficulty. As we've said before, Amazon is not a kind place for its visitors. In his diaries, Fawcett tells of encounters with a 60-foot-long anaconda, which he bravely survived. He writes of endless sleepless nights and waking up with his hands and feet swollen from mosquito bites. Some of his peers said he was invincible and tireless, but the day came during his 8th expedition when he didn't make it back home. Fawcett disappeared without leaving any trace behind. Some even suspect that he was close to reaching his lifelong goal. On the day of his disappearance, he sent an optimistic letter to his wife saying there was nothing to fear, and that he was setting out on a certain final search. Fawcett's failed attempt to find ruins seemed to support what had become a consensus among experts at the time, that this rainforest was too inhospitable to support large, complex societies, let alone cities. Experts were convinced that the Amazon's lost cities were nothing more than fiction. That is, until the 1960s, when modern research began to find evidence that suggested otherwise. Scientists discovered patches of extremely fertile soil. They called it Black Earth. And apparently, they found lots of it in the Amazon, especially alongside rivers. Further research even showed that such soil was created by human waste or the intentional burning of forests, which adds nutrients to the soil below, which could only mean bingo! The discovery of Black Earth was the evidence that large-scale agriculture was possible and probably did exist amidst the Amazon, confirming that settlements could have formed there after all. In the 1990s, along the Xingsu River in Brazil, a team of archaeologists from the University of Florida made a remarkable discovery. Working alongside local indigenous people, they found very long ditches. After mapping them, they realized that these ditches were a sign of a big settlement. They were remnants of carefully designed walls centered around a plaza. Some were roads that led to more settlements. In fact, just this part of the Amazon, about the size of New Jersey, was once a network of dozens of settlements that experts believe could have been home to at least 50,000 people between 1250 and 1650 CE. Other discoveries were possible thanks to LiDAR imaging, a type of technology that allows researchers to take satellite pictures of the forest's ground without having to step inside of it. A network of trenches in Acre, Brazil, dates back to 200 to 1200 CE. These suggest settlements that could have supported 60,000 people. Other images from near the Xingu River suggest cities that could have housed about 50 million people. These were the lost cities of the Amazon. Believe it or not, these images suggest that Fawcett was very close to a major discovery. He was looking for the ruins in the right place, but he was looking for the wrong thing. Unlike cities such as Cusco, which used stone as their primary material, Amazonian settlements used wood and earth to build their cities. These materials are highly deteriorating and probably decomposed over time. Finding them required a bit more technology than what Fawcett had available at his time.
You know, a lot happened in the first millennium CE. Sure, we're talking about 1,000 years worth of human history. If you'll remember from school, you'll know it was the time of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. It was when humans saw the transition to the intense times of the Middle Ages. And some say it was the apex period of the Mayan civilization, all the way in Mesoamerica. But thanks to top-notch technological advancements, we can look at history a lot differently today. You see, archaeologists have found actual proof that the Mayan civilization may have started way before we think it did, and that since the beginning, their civilization was far from simple. To find out more about this, you'll have to tread deep into the Guatemalan rainforests. Are you down for the ride? Rainforests are dense and difficult to access. If you were an archaeologist, I'm betting you'd find them quite threatening as well. That's actually one of the reasons why we've been kept in the dark for so long when it comes to the truth about the Mayans. But take a look at this. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places like Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130-foot wide roads, painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime. For scale, these roads were about half the size of an American football field. Huge, huh? Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these, and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan ruins we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, It's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possibly 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spider web, and from what archaeologists have gathered, they worked as an implied system of economic and social interactions. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 1000 to 350 BCE, was made of small tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids. Oh, and if you're wondering about these gigantic pieces of architecture, don't worry, we'll talk about them in a bit. Now, so far, scientists believe that the roads were built with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone, of course. Researchers were only able to find all of this out because of a new technology called LiDAR imaging. Do you know how we've used sonar technology to map out the ocean bed? Well, this is very similar to that. But instead of using sounds, we use laser systems. This mapping system allows researchers to see through and beyond the thick canopies of forests. It's like we have X-ray vision. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the mid-20th century, and since then, ruins from cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Uxmal have been rediscovered. But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, experts believe that, at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize, and they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Maya had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, plazas, and even courts for playing ball. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets, such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. Now, let's take a look at some of their sites. This is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. At its height, it was comparable in importance to such cities as London or New York in today's world. It is composed of a series of complex monuments. In total, the site has 12,000 buildings. The North Acropolis is Tikal's most ancient complex of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. We've said that the Mayans spread out through different countries, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that Chichen Itza is a 10-hour drive from Tikal today. There's no feud between the two, they were just different city centers, like New York and LA. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castillo, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. Makes you go, Behold, the lost city of Palenque. Another important Maya city is believed to have hosted over 6,000 people at its peak. Archaeologists have made some unusual discoveries on this site. The most eccentric of them all makes us think of Indiana Jones and the Tomb Raider. One of the buildings in Palenque is believed to be the final resting place of the Red Queen of Palenque. She was believed to be the grandmother of the last Mayan king. In her honor, a huge monument was built to keep her body after her passing. The discovery of the tomb itself was already thrilling. Archaeologists found an ancient monument when digging at the site back in 1994. The first they saw was a room with a hidden door. Once they opened the door, they discovered an 8-foot-long corridor. At the end of this corridor was the queen's chamber, and inside was the mummy of the queen herself. They found her to be accompanied by her pearls, jade shells, and expensive rocks. But as the team explored the remains, they saw something strange. The room was filled with a red-colored powder. Researchers knew that the color red was important to the Mayan people, but they didn't understand why the queen was buried with this unknown substance. They took a sample back with them for further analysis and discovered that the red powder was cinnabar, a very dangerous mineral. This powder, when inhaled, can cause severe health damage to a person. The team concluded that this could only be a trap for anyone trying to steal her riches. Talk about curses, huh? One thing that has always troubled researchers is the lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? Some disease? New research in 2017 did shed some light on this issue. Using data from a site called Ciabal, located southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected passing of this great civilization. The information shows that, instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. So, what's your take on the end of this story? Can you pronounce this name of the Aztec capital city? Yes, it's quite difficult to say in English and above my pay grade. Okay, it's Tenochtitlan. And Mayan cities are hard to pronounce too. Consider Jaxchilan. They must be part of the same language, right? Well, not really. The Aztecs and the Mayas were among the most famous Mesoamerican peoples. That's present-day Central America. But they didn't speak the same language, and they weren't even the same civilization. The two nations lived in different eras. The Aztecs dominated the region from the 14th to the 16th century. Back in Europe, this was near the end of the Middle Ages. The Mayas came before the Aztecs. Historians believe they started building city-states in the 3rd century. Their peak lasted until the 10th century. Now, this doesn't mean that the Mayas and the Aztecs didn't have contact with each other. But at the time this happened, the Mayas were on a decline, so the Aztecs traded more with their descendants than with real Mayan people. The two civilizations didn't even live in the same place. The Aztecs built their cities in the north of what is today Mexico. The Mayas lived to the south of them in the Yucatan Peninsula. Yes, that's also in Mexico nowadays. But the Mayas inhabited parts of modern-day Guatemala and Belize as well, and they spoke a number of languages. There's a whole Mayan language family they spoke, not just one language. Some of those languages have survived through today. Estimates show that there are 6 million indigenous Maya people groups spread across Central America. In Guatemala, there are 21 Maya languages recognized by the authorities. Further north, in Mexico, the number of official languages is 29. For the Aztecs, the situation is much simpler. They had a single language. It still has around 1.5 million native speakers, mostly in central Mexico. That's more than any other family of indigenous languages in the region. But is there a chance a speaker of Aztec languages can understand a speaker of the Maya language? Not by a long shot. The two languages are completely unrelated. In fact, they didn't even share the same writing systems. The Mayans were more advanced because they used hieroglyphs. Yep, like the ancient Egyptians. Instead of letters that make up words, ancient civilizations used tiny pictures to symbolize an object or a concept. When the Mayas wanted to write the word jaguar, for example, they would draw a small image of the animal. In total, their writing system had more than 800 characters like this one. Way too complicated compared to the modern way we write down words. But the Aztecs were one step behind the Mayas. They used pictograms and ideograms. Simply put, these are elaborate drawings that mark an object, animal, or concept. Compared to Mayan hieroglyphs, they aren't simple symbols anyone can draw, but true masterpieces of visual art. Only highly skilled painters could draw them. I don't say write because, technically, the Aztecs didn't have a writing system. So you could say that the Mayas were more advanced when it came to language. After all, they had the only known fully developed language in the Americas before the arrival of Europeans. But in terms of culture and economy, the two societies weren't that much different. Neither of them used work animals for agriculture and transport. The main crop for both peoples? You guessed it, corn. What they called maize. Christopher Columbus was the first to transport corn back to the Old Continent in 1493. The Mayans also cultivated sunflower, vanilla, and cotton. The Aztecs produced chili, beans, and squashes. When it comes to meat, the Aztecs were happy to catch fish and shrimp. The Mayans penned turkey, just like we do with chicken today. The Aztec society consisted of nobles and commoners, all led by an emperor. The Mayas mostly lived in independent city kingdoms, ruled by a king and his royal household. There were no wheeled vehicles in these civilizations. Aztec merchants traveled across Mesoamerica carrying goods on their backs. Not the most comfortable mode of transportation, definitely. We shouldn't think of Aztec roads as the ones we have today. They were narrower because they saw only foot traffic. Mayas used a similar road system that also included canoes. They wouldn't travel far from the coast, though. They carved out these vessels from large tree trunks. An average Mayan canoe was 50 feet long. That's the length of a modern-day yacht. The goods these Mayas traded ranged from salt to pearls. They considered meat a luxury good, together with gold, copper, and turquoise. And can you guess the currency of Mayan merchants? Let me give you a hint. It wasn't metal and paper like it is today, but cocoa beans. They had a fixed market price, which made them the ideal payment option. The situation in modern societies is not much different. Around 2/3 of all countries have pegged their currency to the US dollar. For Mesoamericans, cocoa beans were their green banknotes. The Aztecs used the same exact currency, but with a twist. They had something called axe money. One axe was worth 8,000 cacao seeds. I bet their exchange offices were fun places to work. When it comes to minerals, jade was highly esteemed in both cultures. The Mayas and the Aztecs made tools and ornaments from it. These peoples believed jade brought beauty and long life to the person who wore it. Their jade mines were located in present-day Guatemala. And remember that city from the beginning that we could hardly pronounce? The founding of the Aztec capital gives an insight into the belief system of the whole nation. According to legend, the Aztec deity told them to build a city in the place where an eagle sits on a cactus with a snake in its talons. They saw this happen on an island in a lake. This is where they built the city. If you want to find it on the map of Central America today, look for Mexico City. That's the site of an ancient Aztec capital. It even got its name from the ancient nation, because Mexica was an alternate name for the Aztecs. They constructed the city on small artificial islands. It was slightly bigger than the surface area of London Heathrow Airport. The Mayas didn't have a capital city as we know it today. Their civilization spanned across 40 cities. These settlements had a population of 5 to 50,000 inhabitants. Today, these sites could be classified in terms of size as small American towns. But the total number of Mayan cities is not final. Archaeologists keep discovering new ones deep in the jungle of the Yucatan Peninsula. Quite recently, researchers unearthed a new site in the southeast of Mexico. They found a number of stone columns and named the city after the Mayan word for it. Back in the day, the city was part of the central Maya lowlands. Today, this region is covered with thick jungle. The Maya abandoned their settlements in this area around the 8th and the 9th century. Historians still cannot agree on why this happened. Some claim overpopulation was the main issue. Others argue the trade routes collapsed, so Mayan cities couldn't flourish anymore. Whatever the case, northern Mayan cities lived on. The descendants of these peoples were there when the Europeans stumbled upon them several centuries later. The Aztecs were also present in today's Mexico at this time, but contact with a foreign culture didn't bring them much good. There was an outbreak of smallpox that sealed the Aztecs' fate. This doesn't mean that this American nation left the world stage forever, though. Every time we say words like avocado, chili, guacamole, chocolate, and coyote, we are actually reviving the Aztec language. These words are present in pretty much every language on the planet. Mayan words also entered modern English. Linguists argue that the word shark actually comes from a Mayan language. This is the word these ancient Mesoamerican people used for fish. Both ancient civilizations left behind pyramids, and they look very similar in style. The only hint that can help you differentiate between them is that there are way more Mayan ruins that still exist today. Finally, regarding maize, or corn as we call it, there's a story among the Maya descendants that their process of harvesting corn back then was called amazing. Get it? Maize? Corn? Okay, I made that up. You're not surprised, are you? So, imagine you're 15 and you get bored of playing video games. Instead, to pass the time, you decide to give some attention to an old hobby of yours, tracking down lost Mayan cities. You've heard that some ancient civilizations are said to have built entire cities based on constellations, so you decide to check out whether that was true for the Mayans. You find a book containing all the constellations the Mayan civilization believed to exist. You open good old Google Maps and map every ancient Mayan city discovered to date. You start seeing that this information actually matches. And truly, the biggest ancient Mayan cities correspond to the brightest and biggest stars of the Mayan constellations. Okay, this is getting interesting. You manage to map out over 100 ancient cities when you suddenly notice something strange. There's an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. Could this mean there is a long-lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? You might think this sounds too daydreaming, but the story is actually true. The previous account happened to a Canadian teenager named William Gadie. The boy is known as a science genius and had even won an award for the constellation theory we presented just now. When he noticed that a 3rd city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to scour the internet for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. He looked into images from NASA, JAXA, a Japan-based satellite company, and Google Earth. These images were still insufficient to answer his questions, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency. His friend provided him with state-of-the-art satellite imagery that gave him the answer he was looking for. According to the images, there is a large square area right on the border of Mexico and Belize, which looks like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert known as Dr. Armand Laroque from the University of New Brunswick. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. The scientific and archaeological community went crazy with the 15-year-old's discovery. Could this really be true? Some background. Lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the mid-20th century. Since then, ruins from cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Uxmal have been rediscovered. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. They began to settle in the area as early as 1500 BCE. Experts believe that, at its height, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a crowd. And their cities were pretty interesting. Their civilization spanned over Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They survived mainly on agriculture, so they developed a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, plazas, and even courts for ball games. The Mayans were keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets such as Venus and Mars, and they were able to predict the exact dates of eclipses. That's why the methodology William used to discover this long-lost Mayan city was unusual, but not completely surreal. The Mayans were keen astronomers, so it wouldn't be too strange that they built their major architectural feats in relation to the sky, would it? And they wouldn't be the first ones to be doing so. There is a famous fringe of Egyptology dedicated to studying how the Giza pyramids were built in perfect alignment with the Orion constellation, meaning that each pyramid was purposely built to align with one of the major stars of Orion's belt. According to William, he first had the idea to look at the Mayan constellations because he couldn't understand why the Mayans built their cities where they built them. Most major cities, such as Chichen Itza and Uxmal, aren't near any rivers or significant bodies of water. Instead, they're built on marginal lands and on top of mountains, which confused the 15-year-old. His next thought was that it might have something to do with astronomy. William named the new city he discovered Mouth of Fire, which is also my nickname, and he even won a merit award for his hard work. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community, and many Mayan experts worked to debunk William's findings. Some archaeologists say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Anthony Aveni, a renowned anthropologist and astronomer, referred to William's methodology as an act of creative imagination. He explained that there is no way to be sure what the Mayan constellations really were. It's all just hypothetical. Another debunking of William's findings came from Mayanist David Stewart, who said that the object identified on the satellite imagery is nothing but an old cornfield. His claim was supported by an expedition that took place near the area in 2021, when the archaeologists present reported there was nothing at all in this area. Still, a 15-year-old boy almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. Similar techniques as those used by William are actually being used to unearth lost civilizations all over the world. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parquet, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in Egypt and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any sign of where there could have been cities long ago. What happens, she says, is that any time you have something buried, it's going to be covered either by vegetation, soil or sand, or some other modern construction on top of it. In order to assess whether there is something hidden under large canopies of vegetation or not, she uses infrared technology, for instance. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done in a similar way. Satellite imagery detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 to 1200 CE. These suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people. But in this case, the satellite imagery did indeed correspond to what was on the ground. Researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls, centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans. Advances in satellite tech have also shed new light on long-discovered ancient Mayan cities, such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It was composed of a series of complex monuments, many of them believed to have been the resting places of kings and chiefs. Tikal is already known to have been big, but recent discoveries show it could have been even 3 times larger than what scientists originally believed. The main discovery revolves around a fortification on the outskirts of the city, indicating how far the original city stretched. And new discoveries still take place. In 2017, researchers also unearthed new clues regarding the potential causes of the decline of the Mayan civilization. Using data from a site in Cebu, located 62 miles southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the sudden demise of this great civilization. The information shows that, instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely collapsed in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. Wow, it seems like it's a prime time to uncover ancient ruins. What do you say? Will you give it a try as well?
Imagine discovering an ancient city without leaving the comfort of your home. In 1963, a man in the Nevşehir province of Turkey did exactly that. He was renovating his house. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room. He continued digging and saw a tunnel. This is how Derinkuyu underground city was found. Derinkuyu is one of the deepest multi-level underground settlements of Cappadocia and in all of Turkey. This engineering masterpiece has 8 levels. The inhabitants living on those floors had access to cellars, storage areas, chapels, a school, a study room, and other structures. All floors are connected by an extensive network of tunnels. It's believed that the underground city was built as a shelter. You can't see the construction from the outside. Its depth is approximately 279 feet. The complex was large enough to shelter about 20,000 people, plus their livestock and food supplies. There's also a 180-foot ventilation shaft. People used it both for ventilation and as a well. The well supplied water both to the villagers living on the surface and to those hiding in the underground city. Interestingly, those living on the bottom levels were able to cut off the water supply for the upper and ground levels. This kept the water safe from potential poisoning. The place was designed for protection. The tunnels could be blocked from the inside with huge round rolling stone doors. The passageways were extremely narrow. Potential invaders had to enter the tunnels one at a time. Seems like they thought of everything in the 7th century BCE. Archaeologists believed the Phrygians were the ones who first built the levels. After them, the structure was used and enhanced in Roman times. This was when the chapels were added. The golden time of Derinkuyu, however, was during the Byzantine era. But how did these people manage to create such tunnels? Well, the rock they carved them into wasn't usual. It was soft volcanic rock. It appeared due to a geological process that began millions of years ago. Volcanic eruptions covered the area in thick ash. It then solidified into this soft rock. When the natural forces of wind and water eroded softer parts, only hard elements remained. Fun fact, fairy chimneys are also made of intricately shaped volcanic soft rock, but they formed naturally without any human intervention. I'm still in Turkey, but this time, my destination is Çanakkale, where a myth came to life. For 3,000 years, people believed that Homer's Iliad was fiction and that Troy never existed. In 1863, everything changed. Expatriate Frank Calvert discovered ancient ruins in western Turkey. He was convinced they belonged to the ancient city of Troy. Heinrich Schliemann examined this area in 1868. That's when Troy saw sunlight again after all those centuries. Troy has complex layers. Over the years, 9 ancient cities were built on top of one another. Historians say that the area was strategically located between Europe and Asia, so it became a prosperous trade and cultural center. This strategic position made Troy attractive throughout history. After the Trojan conflict, the city was abandoned between the years 1100 to 700 BCE. Then Greek settlers rediscovered the area, and Alexander the Great ruled there. The Romans then invaded the city. Speaking of this event, the first thing you would see when visiting the site is a replica of the wooden Trojan horse from a movie shot in 2004. The next stop is Lothal. In the 1950s, Lothal and several other Harappan sites were discovered in India. These new provinces extended the boundaries of the Indus Valley civilization. Lothal was an important part of the Harappan civilization. It had vast cotton and rice fields. Plus, it had a bead-making factory. Beads were made from semi-precious stones, like agate. Many of these beads were later found in Mesopotamia, which serves as evidence that Lothal was a thriving trading port. Archaeologists believe that the city was part of an ancient trade route. Traces of agriculture? Check. Traces of trade? Check. What else? The remains of residential buildings, streets, bathing pavements, and drains. Some real city planning, and impressive examples of early urbanization. The town was well constructed. There were modern houses. Some of them had 6 rooms. bathrooms, a large courtyard, and even a veranda. Lothal also had the world's oldest known dock. It linked the city with the Sabarmati River and the trade route. The ancient Mayan city of Calakmul is located in southern Mexico in the tropical forest of the Tierras Bajas. From 500 CE to 800 CE, Calakmul was home to over 50,000 people. There was a central plaza surrounded by outer districts. And if we count both the inhabitants of all those outer areas and those who lived in the center, Calakmul had a population of more than 1.5 million people. It was a city that was habitable for 12 centuries. It's believed that the place had more constructions than any other excavated Maya settlements in the region. After 1000 CE, the Maya civilization there faced a downfall. The settlement that was once the center of Mesoamerica was almost completely abandoned. The ancient city was at the heart of the second largest tropical forest in America. The site is well preserved, so today, if you were to visit it, you would be able to picture what life looked like in ancient Mayan times. The city remains include architectural complexes and sculpted monuments, defensive systems, quarries, water management features, agricultural terraces, massive temple pyramids, and palaces, not to mention a variety of body ornaments and other accompanying objects. It proves that complex, state-organized societies lived in this tropical forest. The Mayans depicted nature in their paintings, pottery, sculptures, rituals, and even food. I'm moving on to a place people thought didn't really exist. The city of Heracleion appeared only in a few inscriptions and ancient texts. Turns out, it was waiting to be discovered for thousands of years. Scientists searched the majority of the coast of Egypt. But then, archaeologist Frank Gadie and his team detected a colossal face looking at them from under the water. The ancient city of Heracleion was discovered completely submerged 4 miles off Alexandria's coast. In the ruins of the lost city, there were 64 ships, 700 anchors, and a treasure trove of gold coins. Archaeologists consider a 16-foot tall statue and the temple remains the most important findings discovered by the expedition. Back then, the city had ceremonies and celebrations that took place in the Temple of Amun. The ruins and artifacts were made from granite and diorite, so they were in good condition even after having been in contact with water for centuries. They give people a glimpse into what life was like 2,300 years ago in one of the most important trade ports of the world. The city had a network of canals. You can think of it as an ancient Egyptian Venice. The canals linked many separate harbors and anchorages. Towers, temples, houses, and other structures were also linked by bridges. Heracleion was the country's main port for international trade and the collection of taxes. No one really knows how the city ended up submerged, but archaeologists connect it with natural causes. At the end of the 2nd century BCE, most probably after a flood, Heracleion got covered with water. Then, Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander the Great, became more glorious than Heracleion. Before Alexandria's fame, Heracleion was the main port of entry to Egypt. So, after the disaster, many ships heading for Heracleion had to change their route and go to Alexandria. Heracleion lost its glory until its rediscovery in 1933. Mesa Verde is an American national park in Colorado. The park is the largest archaeological preserve in the U.S., with more than 5,000 sites, including 600 cliff dwellings. Mesa Verde means green table in Spanish. The name comes from the shape of the mountains in the area, with flat tops and steep sides. The park is an ancestral Puebloan archaeological site. Starting from 7500 BCE, a group of nomadic Paleo-Indians seasonally lived in Mesa Verde. They were hunters, gatherers, and crop farmers. They built the first pueblos in the region. By the end of the 12th century, the Mesa Verdeans began constructing massive cliff dwellings, which are now the best-known structures in the park.
The story goes that 2 Mayan twin boys loved to play ball. Sure, they were really good at it, but they also made a lot of noise when playing. The lords of the underworld soon became bothered by the sound and summoned the two boys to the underworld, a place the Mayans called Xibalba. As soon as the boys reached their gloomy destination, the lords of the underworld began putting them through a series of tests. Soon enough, the inexperienced twin boys failed the tests and lost their lives. But this was not in vain. This sad event resulted in the appearance of a beautiful fruit tree. Soon enough, a young woman saw a beautiful fruit on this tree and reached up to pick it. Legend has it that soon after that, she gave birth to another set of twin boys named Hunahpu and Xibalba. Just like their ancestors, these twins were great ball players, but they were equally as loud, and the lords of the underworld became annoyed again. They decided to ask this pair of twins to come to play a game in the underworld, hoping to get rid of them too. When the twins arrived, the lord sent them through a number of frightening places. The first one was the House of Gloom, which was very dark. They then passed through the House of Knives, where they had to avoid getting injured. The twins then built a fire in the House of Cold, so that they didn't freeze, and ran through the House of Jaguars, where they tricked the animals into not eating them. Finally, they entered the House of Bats, where they seemed to have lost their luck. One of the bats managed to run off with Hunahpu's head. The lords then challenged the twins to play ball with them, but the boys were clearly at a disadvantage. Xibalba placed a turtle on Hunahpu's shoulders to make up for his lost head, and they began playing. As the lords became distracted by an animal near the court, Xibalba stole his brother's head and placed it back in its place. Much to the annoyance of the lords, the twins were now able to tie the game. Hunahpu and Xibalba continued to perform a series of tricks for the lords of the underworld. One of them involved Xibalba injuring Hunahpu and then bringing him back to life. The lords were so impressed by the twins' performance that they asked them to do the same trick on them. Of course, the twins agreed, but after performing their trick on some of the lords, they refused to revive them. Seeing what had happened, the lords of the underworld admitted defeat and begged for their lives, promising not to intervene in the lives of people ever again. Hunahpu and Xibalba were happy to have avenged their ancestors and gained the respect of the lords. Legend has it that the lords of heaven were so impressed by the twins that they took them to live in the sky by turning them into the moon and the sun. The Maya civilization was one of the most dominant indigenous societies in history, and their folklore and traditions are still discovered and studied today. They used to live in a territory called Mesoamerica. It was made up of modern-day Mexico and parts of Central America like Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Yucatan Peninsula, and El Salvador. They lived from 1800 to 900 BCE and up to 900 to 1500 CE. Apart from their impressive legends, the Maya were very skilled inventors. They're known for their calendars, writing systems, farming methods, and sports. Their writing, for example, was found preserved on buildings and stone monuments, as well as in rare books and pottery. It's a system made out of more than 800 hieroglyphics in various combinations. Each of those signs was said to represent a syllable. Their writing system was deciphered by accident by Tatiana Proskorakov, an American woman who initially studied to be an architect. Since she didn't find a job in her field, she eventually became a Mayanist in her own right, despite not being academically trained. She was the first to notice that the Mayan upended frog glyph meant birth, and that their toothache glyph meant the date when the king ascended to the throne. It made it easier for scientists to pinpoint birthdays, as well as the names of the rulers of a specific Mayan dynasty. They also invented the concept of zero, which is seen as one of the greatest innovations in mathematics, physics, and human history altogether. Sure, even back then, people understood the idea of having nothing, but the concept of zero as a number is a relatively new invention. A fun fact about Mayans is that they really liked hats. The bigger your hat was, the more important you looked. Not only was it a sort of fashion statement, but it also made them look taller, which was a big deal for their aesthetic. The Mayans also came up with one of the most intricate and complex calendars in human history. It was the first to use 0 as a placeholder. Their calendar ended on December 21st, 2012, which led some people to believe that it translated to the end of the world. Obviously, that was not the case. It just so happened that the date coincided with the end of a Mayan cycle of years. But you know, as advanced in science and astronomy as they were, they did make some mistakes. One of them was their belief that the world was flat. Their theory was that the 4 corners of the world were watched by the Brother Lords, who kept the sky from falling over their lands. Hats off for their menus, though, as they were well-known chocolate eaters. They turned eating chocolate into a form of art. The drink they made wasn't really like the hot chocolate we enjoy today, though. Their recipe included mixing cacao with water, honey, chili pepper, cornmeal, and other ingredients to make a foamy, spicy drink. The ritual of drinking cacao was a crucial part of their celebrations. We're not done discovering all the amazing parts of their architecture and civilization. It was only a few years ago that a Maya pyramid was found at Tonina, in the Mexican state of Chiapas. It was estimated to be more than 1,000 years old. The reason why it escaped archaeologists for so long was that it lay hidden under what was believed to be a natural hill. The ruins of 2 Mayan cities have been recently discovered in the Mexican state of Campeche. Why didn't we find them until now? Well, they were concealed by really thick vegetation, which made it difficult for archaeologists to reach them. The Mayans didn't just disappear. Their descendants are still around today, many of them choosing to live in their ancestral homelands. You can find them in Guatemala, for example, where the Maya people make up the majority of the population. Overall, the Maya ethnic group contains people that speak different Mayan languages, such as Yucatec, Quiche, Quechua, or Mopan. They had no idea what a spa day was, but the Mayans really enjoyed a nice sweat once in a while. Sweat lodges were discovered around ancient Mayan sites. They were built out of stone or adobe. These rooms were an essential part of their cleansing and healthcare rituals. One of the earliest sweat lodges was found in Quello in northern Belize and appeared to date back 3,000 years. One of the most important parts of the Mayan culture was a ball game which they named pits. It had both political and spiritual significance. We can see ball courts at important parts of Mayan archaeological sites. The main goal of the game was to pass a rubber ball through a very high stone hoop without using your hands. Basically, it was a combination of soccer and basketball. However, it could have serious consequences. The loser could, at times, even lose his own life. Ooh, high stakes indeed. Because of this game and the need for bouncy balls, the Mayan people were some of the first cultures to use rubber. They made it using natural latex. There were different kinds of rubber depending on what natural substances the latex was mixed with. And that, my friend, is the way the ball bounces. Sorry, but you know me, I just couldn't resist.
Imagine you could spend an entire week scanning ancient ruins and taking photographs of the world's most surreal archaeological sites. Would you be up for it? So, let's do some digging. The first stop on your busy itinerary is Southeast Asia. It's home to some pretty cool ruins. You start in Bagan, located in the hinterlands of Myanmar. There are many ways to visit the site, and you're glad you've booked 2 different experiences. The first one is a hot air balloon trip at sunrise. Right before dawn, you board the balloon, and as soon as the sun starts to appear on the horizon, you begin your flight over the marvelous area. As the sun rises, it glistens on more than 2,000 conic-shaped golden structures. The hot air balloon ride is quick, but it gives you unparalleled views of all the 40 miles over which the site sprawls. Back on land, you rent a bicycle and roam the village of ruins. Some of them are open and allow you to peep inside. These magnificent ruins were built between the 11th and 13th century CE and were mainly places of worship. There were originally over 10,000 buildings, but they were gradually deteriorating over time due to earthquakes. Thankfully, the site became a UNESCO World Heritage Site back in 2015 and has since been preserved. Up next, you catch a flight to Cambodia. You take some time to visit Angkor, the world-famous archaeological site nestled deep within the jungle. Good thing you've brought bug spray with you. The city of Angkor was once the capital of the Khmer Empire from the 9th to 15th century. FYI, the word Angkor means capital city in the Khmer language. The city was founded by King Yasovarman I, and it became one of the largest cities in the pre-industrial world. Researchers say nearly 1 million people live there. Until today, Angkor is admired for its stunning architecture. The Khmer style is recognized in the use of huge blocks of sandstone. The towers are believed to have been once decorated with gold. But today, the site is a maze of vine-covered temples. The city was abandoned in 1431 and wasn't rediscovered until the 1840s. Oh, and just so you know, this is also a UNESCO Heritage Site. It became one in 1992, in case you want to brag to your friends about your culturally rich adventures in the future. Now, your trip continues in Egypt. You're here to visit the Karnak Temple in the city of Luxor. You opt for the most unusual way to get to Luxor. That is, a boat ride down the Nile River. Leaving Cairo, you head south until you reach the famous ancient city. Luxor was once the capital of Egypt and a true hub of power and wealth. That is why the Karnak complex is such a great archaeological site. You choose to visit it at night, and still at the entrance, you are struck by the site's beauty. In the evening, artificial lights cast a golden glow on the temple statues and stone columns. The temple is huge and was built mainly around the 18th and 19th centuries BCE. Each Egyptian pharaoh from that period left their own architectural mark on the site. The highlight of this tour is taking a walk through the Avenue of Sphinxes and discovering the Great Hypostyle Hall. This hall is filled with towering pylons and solid sandstone columns, a true wonder. From Egypt, you head down to Jordan. Now, if you like terracotta landscapes, you've come to the right place. The city of Petra is a marvel of the ancient world. Located in Jordan's desert, the city was a commercial hub back in the 4th century BCE. The Nabateans, an Arab Bedouin tribe, lived in the so-called Rose City and thrived for many years, having accumulated a significant amount of wealth. The city was known for its innovative water management system, which made the region inhabitable. And yes, you'll catch a glimpse of its ruins on your tour. The rock-carved gate-like structure Petra is famous for what is called the Pharaoh's Treasury. It stands at the main entrance to the site and is said to have a treasure hidden beneath it. Don't forget to stand right beneath it and take one of those classic pictures for social media. Once Petra has been ticked off the list, you fly to southern Europe. More specifically, to the tip of the Italian boot. You have a day trip scheduled to visit the ruins of Pompeii. Pompeii can be reached by car from the city of Naples. It's home to the eerie yet well-preserved ruins of a city that was once engulfed by lava. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, it left the city of Pompeii completely buried under millions of tons of volcanic ash. The ancient city was first discovered by beneath the volcanic rock in the 16th century, but it was first cleared from debris in the 1870s. Today, you'll be able to walk down the streets of these ancient Roman ruins and imagine what the town looked like in its heyday. Pompeii was a vibrant and rich municipality. The site's ruins revealed that many areas of Pompeii had boasted impressive bakeries, markets, and even houses with balconies, which were a sign of great wealth at the time. And believe it or not, even some artworks survived the eruption. Archaeologists found well-preserved frescoes and murals with mythological creatures. All this indicates that members of the high society lived there. The city even had thermal baths and showers made from luxurious materials. While you're still in Europe, you'll hop over to visit the iconic Stonehenge. It's a perfect day trip if you stay in the city of London, just a short train journey away. Stonehenge dots the Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England, and is one of the world's most recognized ancient ruins. More than 5,000 years old, these curious stone rings are some of the oldest stone structures on the planet. Created out of sandstone, they are shrouded in misery. Who built them and why is still largely unknown. Popular theories claim that Stonehenge was used as a great solar calendar, built to help people keep track of days, weeks, and months. Talk about hard work to create a mere calendar, huh? In the final leg of your trip, we'll take you to explore the Southern Americas. In Guatemala, in Central America, you'll find ancient Mayan ruins. The lost city of Tikal is a city made of 3,000 buildings, the remains of the capital of the Mayan Empire. You can compare its importance to such cities as London or New York today. The North Acropolis is Tikal's most ancient complex of monuments. Built solely by human hands in 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. You might wonder what made such a great city turn into ruins. Well, archaeologists have no clue about the cause of Tikal's decline. Until today, this question remains unanswered. Was it a drought? Disease? Maybe we'll never know. Are you in the mood for some Mayan ruins? Chichen Itza is an archaeological site with the best preserved pyramids on Earth. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 1.9 square miles and has many ruins spread throughout it. The highlight is El Castilla, a tremendous step temple, rising 80 feet above the ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps on each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same as the number of days in the solar year. Phew, what an intense trip. Time to head home now and soak it all in. See you next time.